This is Thursday. It's August the 4th, 2022. Today's devotional is titled, Sir, I Have No Man. Our scripture reading, Mark chapter 2, John chapter 5. This devotional, however, will focus on John chapter 5, verses 1 through 16. And we find Jesus and his disciples returning to Jerusalem for the Passover, as was their custom. Now, the Lord making his way to the temple, he passed through the sheep gate. Now, in some Bibles, it describes it as the market, but that's been added by translators. The setting actually was a pool of water near the sheep gate. Now, this is the gate through which the sheep that were to be sacrificed were led through the city to the Temple Mount, where they would be offered. Now, the pool we find in our story in verse 2 was called Bethesda, which means the house of mercy. And it was shaded by 5 porches. So it's a very large area that we find here. Well, in verse 3, as the Lord passed the pool, he gazed upon what is described as, in verse 3, is a great multitude of impotent folk, of blind, halt, meaning lame, and withered. Now, why was this crowd of suffering souls waiting at the pool of water called Bethesda? Well, the answer to that is found in verse 4, because John writes that they were waiting for the moving of the water in verse 3. Verse 4, for an angel went down a certain season at certain times into the pool, troubled the water. Whoever then first, after the troubling of the water, stepped in was made whole of whatsoever disease he had. And so these poor souls were all waiting at the pool. And the first one to step foot into the pool at the time that they noticed that the waters were stirring would be healed. Now, in the midst of this great crowd of needy souls, we find that there was a man afflicted with an ailment for 38 years. Now, he is described in this chapter as having an infirmity and was suffering from a chronic debilitating disease. Some people suggest it might have been a stroke. Well, remembering now, the Lord knows all men and what lies within the hearts of men, the Lord took pity on this man and asked, wilt thou be made whole, or be made sound? Will you be healed? Well, the man answered the Lord, saying, Sir, in verse 7, I have no man when the water is troubled to put me into the pool. But while I am coming, while I am struggling to get to the pool, another man steps down into the water before me. Now, 38 years he had been afflicted, and I presume his family, his loved ones, and his friends had no hope of his recovery. And so there was none who waited to assist him to the healing waters when they were stirred. Those who shared similar afflictions showed him no mercy, and they would not defer their own distress to prefer him who had suffered so long. Now, there are 3 divine attributes displayed by Jesus Christ in this chapter, which actually occurs on the Sabbath day. The first one we find in verse 14, and that is that Jesus Christ was omniscient. We read, he saw the man, and then the word knew. He knew not only how long he had been afflicted, but even the reason for his suffering. The Lord would later warn him in verse 14, sin no more, lest a worse thing come unto thee. And so the Lord is omniscient. The second thing we notice is also he is a God of grace. Jesus demonstrated that to the man. When the Lord asked, wilt thou be made whole? The man answered with a despairing grievance. In verse 7, I have no man. And yet the Lord had compassion for him, though there were many others who suffered. You see, he was no more deserving than those others were, and yet it was grace, not merit, that moved Jesus to heal him. And then, of course, there's the third divine attribute that is found here, and that is that the Lord also demonstrated omnipotence and divine authority over sickness and disease. When Jesus commanded the man, rise, take up thy bed, and walk in verse 8, we read in verse 9, immediately he was made whole and took up his bed and walked. 38 years he had suffered, and with the power of Jesus' spoken word, he was made whole. Well, let's look at a concluding thought to this moment of healing and miracle. There are many other events that follow this story, but the one I want to draw your attention to is regarding this man. For when he was healed, he took up his bed and he began to walk through the temple grounds, where he was accosted by some Jews for carrying his bed on the Sabbath, the same bed upon which he had lain for 38 years. Now I wonder how many times those men passed that poor man when he waited at the pool of Bethesda and nobody took pity on his soul. Adding to the hypocrisy of those Jews, rather than rejoice with the man's healing, they set their hearts to persecute him, Jesus, who had healed him. We read in verse 16 that they sought to slay him because he healed the man on the Sabbath day. Now, lest we be hypocritical ourselves as we would criticize those Jews for their callousness, I want you to consider how many people you and I might pass in a day that are hurting as well. How many do we walk past and we show no pity or compassion for their sorrows? Are we sensitive to the troubles that are borne by others? Indeed, are there some who know us, and they would say, I have no man who cares for my soul. Dear friend, let us not be so busy about our day, maybe our work and our ministry, that we fail to take time to show love and compassion to others. That's my challenge for you today. Thank you for joining me. God bless you, and I look forward to seeing you tomorrow. Bye-bye.